For I am very dear to him, and he is dear to me. Please repeat. Of these, the one who is in full knowledge, and who is always engaged in pure devotional service is the best. For I am very dear to him, and he is dear to me. This is once again Bhagavad-Gita as it is, chapter 7, text 17. And here is Srila Prabhupada's purport. Free from all contaminations of material desires, the distressed, the inquisitive, the penniless, and the seeker after supreme knowledge can all become pure devotees. But out of them, he who is in knowledge of the absolute truth and free from all material desires becomes a really pure devotee of the Lord. And of the four orders, the devotee who is in full knowledge and is at the same time engaged in devotional service is, the Lord says, the best. By searching after knowledge, one realizes that his self is different from his material body. And when further advanced, he comes to the knowledge of impersonal Brahman and Paramatma. When one is fully purified, he realizes that his constitutional position is to be the eternal servant of God. So, by association with pure devotees, the inquisitive, the distressed, the seeker after material amelioration, and the man in knowledge all become themselves pure. But in the preparatory stage, the man who is in full knowledge of the Supreme Lord and is at the same time executing devotional service is very dear to the Lord. He who is situated in pure knowledge of the transcendence of the Supreme Personality of God is so protected in devotional service that material contamination cannot touch him. Om Ajnanatimirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kada Mahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guroho Shri Yuddhapada Kamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesh Gopika Kant Radha Kant Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanusute Devi Pranamami Haripriye Vansha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Tesham Jnani Nitya Yukta Eka Bhaktir Vishishyate Priyo hi jnaninotyartham aham sa cha mama priya. Of these, the one who is in full knowledge and who is always engaged in pure devotional service is the best. For I am very dear to him, and he is dear to me. Of these, Tesham. Who are they? Of these. Who are these? Who's been following? Yes. 4 kinds of devotees have just been described in text 16, just as 4 kinds of non-devotees were described before that. This is a very, very important chapter, according to the Acharyas commenting on Bhagavad-Gita. And particularly these few verses that we've just read are extremely important because in these verses, it's at least Baladev Vidyabhushan lays out different categories of devotees different categories or classes of devotees that he constantly refers to throughout the rest of his commentary. So it's good to know them. I don't know if we've heard this already. I'm just coming from Kurukshetra. But I'll just recapitulate very quickly. There are 2 classes of devotees we know. There are sakama devotees and nishkama devotees. Sakama devotees means devotees who have material desires. Nishkama devotees means they have no material desires. And Baladev Vidyabhushan in particular, he mentions 2 overlapping classes for these categories of individuals. One he calls the Guni Bhuta Bhaktas. Guni Bhuta Bhaktas. That is to say that they may be coincidentally engaged in devotional service, with or without conviction, with or without pure intentions, with or without knowledge. Because they're following the injunctions of the Shastras, to that extent at least, they're considered amongst the devotees, but because their goal is something other than devotional service, they're considered non-devotees at the same time. They're called Guni Bhutas. They're activated by the 3 modes of material nature. On the other hand, Pradhani Bhuta Bhaktas are those who may or may not have material desires and knowledge, but they have decided that their chief goal in life, their ideal goal in life, is Krishna alone. So the Sakama devotees, those who have material desires and are trying to surrender to Krishna sincerely, but are not perfect, they fall into this category of Pradhani Bhuta Bhaktas. So chapter 7, and actually the middle 6 chapters of Bhagavad-Gita, chapter 6 through 12, they are addressing the Pradhani Bhuta Bhaktas and the Kevala Bhaktas. Kevala Bhakta means the absolutely pure devotees. They have no interest in anything. They're perfect. Nitya Siddhas fall into that category. Devotees of Srila Prabhupada's category fall into that class of devotees. So they're especially described in the middle 6 chapters, wherein they're protected on both sides by Sambandha Gyan, the kind of knowledge that allows us to understand the Lord and his relationships, and the relationships between the energies of the Lord as well, including the living entities. So we've discussed that in the last text. 4 kinds of pious persons who may not be purely motivated, but they at least serve Krishna. And we know who they are. They are the pious, they're the distressed persons, they're the inquisitive persons, the persons who need money, and here we're talking about the Gyanis. 3 of them are practicing Karma Mishra Bhakti. Karma Mishra Bhakti means their bhakti is mixed with fruitive activities. And they generally tend to be Sakama Grahastas, householders with material desires. Those are the persons who worship Krishna in distress. They're curious about Krishna consciousness, or they worship Krishna for some sort of material benefit. On the other hand, the Acharyas commenting here say that the Jnani is special, as Krishna says in this verse. Eka bhaktir vishishyate nitya yukta Jnani vishishyate. The jnani is special. He's distinct. Why? Because he's nitya yukta and eka bhakti. Here Madhvacharya quotes from Garuda Purana in his commentary on this verse. I don't remember the Sanskrit, but the idea is that eka bhakti is another word for nitya yukta. He's quoting directly from Garuda Purana. And it would seem that Krishna is also paraphrasing from Garuda Purana, as he does throughout Bhagavad-Gita. Krishna endorses this process of citing the Shastra, and he exemplifies the process as well. Everything that Krishna says, it can be verified. So, nitya yukta. This is what makes the jnani special. The jnani does not have material desires. He may not be solidly situated in pure devotional service yet, but he is not chasing after anything in this mundane realm, and he's also not bewildered by the mundane realm. So he's special. And all the acharyas commenting on this verse have explained to greater or lesser degrees what makes him so special. Ramanujacharya raises the question, why is he so special? And he answers his question with this, well, the last line. Priyo hi jnani no tirthamaham sachamama priya. Krishna says, the jnani is more dear to me because I am more dear to him. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur points out in his commentary on this verse, well, he quotes, Ye yatha mam prapadyante tans tathaiva bhajami aham. As they approach me, I will reciprocate. Exactly. What happens if a person has material desires? Let's say we are sakama grihastas, most of us are. And we're also interested mainly in Krishna consciousness, then where do we go at the time of death? Anybody know? Or what do we get as a result of that bhakti? What does Krishna give us? You can take birth in a devotee family. What else?
You can become a demigod also.
You can go to Swarga Loka and become a demigod. What else? Yes, aristocratic family you may take.
One interesting thing in Bhagavatam explains Prabhupada that we can become a demigod and then Krishna will be performing a pastime on earthly planet and you can participate
Yes.
in the pastime.
It's described in Baladev Dabhushan's comment, maybe Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's commentary, sorry. He says that such a devotee, he will get from Krishna, because he has not cultivated pure prema yet, he will get from Krishna whatever it is that he desires from Krishna. But that may be all he gets. Then, after having received what he desires from Krishna, he will get salokya mukti. What does that mean?
Starting the same planet.
You go back to Godhead. You go to Vaikuntha or you go to Goloka. It doesn't say that he necessarily gets prema in the higher categories of rasas. Sakya bhava, vatsalya bhava, and madhurya bhava. Now what about the jnanis, the jnani bhaktas, jnana mishra bhaktas? They get jnana, they get liberation also, and only if they come in touch with a pure devotee and get that mercy from that pure devotee, then they can also get prema. But even then, the level of prema that they get will be qualified by the cultivation that they've accepted. So it means, really, that whatever you put into this process is whatever you get out of this process. And it doesn't really matter whether you're a liberated soul or whether you're a conditioned soul. Still, you have to be very focused on what you want. This is the point. And that's why Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur is quoting the verse, Ye yatha mam prapadyante tans tathaiva bhajamyaham. Among the Guni Bhuta Bhaktas, who we can consider for all intents and purposes to be non-devotees, what do they get? They also, the Sakama Guni Bhutas, they go to the higher planetary systems. They may even get liberation on the Vaikuntha planet if they get mercy. But generally the jnanis among them, they get only jnana. They get nirvana moksha, and they remain in shantarasa. Most of them, almost all of them will remain in shantarasa. Only if we get mercy from a pure devotee can we come above this. This is the point. So devotional service really means to work hard to gain the mercy of a pure devotee. This is why all these things have not been stated, but they're deeply embedded within the simple words of Narottam Das Thakur, who says, Shri Guru Charana Padma Kevala Bhakti Sadma Bandhomoi Savatanamade. Be careful how you bow down to the lotus feet of the spiritual master, because his two lotus feet are the only place where bhakti resides. Okay, so Ramanujacharya has said the reason that the devotee, this Jnani among these four classes of devotees is special is because he has attachment. He's dear to the Lord, and the Lord is dear to him. Sridhar Swami gives 4 specific reasons in his commentary why this is so. The first thing is pretty clear. He is constantly engaged. This is something Krishna has said himself in the verse. Nitya Yukta. And he defines it in the same way that Madhvacharya has defined it. Eka Bhakti means Nitya Yukta, constantly engaged in devotional service. Why is the Jnani constantly engaged in devotional service? Why not the others? Is it possible for the Sakama Bhaktas, the Grahastas, and those who are wanting money or maybe freedom from distress or who are just curious, can they practice constant devotional service?
No.
They can't. What is it that obstructs them from practicing constant?
That is the priority.
They have their own desires. Romapad Swami put this very nicely in one seminar I heard from him. He was speaking on the verses, on the instructions that Kapila Muni gave to his mother Devahuti. And he was describing how the very nature of bhakti is that Bhakti Devi removes anarthas. And therefore, if we cling to the anarthas, then what happens when Bhakti Devi removes the anarthas and we're clinging to them? We become removed also. And she doesn't remove us, we remove ourselves. This is the point. Because we're holding on. The ball is in our court, and it's in our court forever. So, the Jnani doesn't have this problem because he is freed from dehadi abhimana. He has dehadi abhimana abhava. He says. There's an absence of this false ego, and therefore because the false ego is absent, therefore the attachment to so many things in this world, beginning with the material body, that's also absent. What kind of attachments are we talking about? Yeah, there's a verse I'm thinking of. Pasyannapi na pashyati deha apatya kalatradishu. These things. The deha is there, apatya is there, kalatra, the wife, the children, the house, adi, adi, adi. Adi means etc. in Sanskrit. Atma sainyeshu asatsu api. Although these soldiers, this is our private security system, our spouse, our bank balance, our safe haven, our house. In America, every house you see that has a little eye on it, and it says this house is protected by such and such security system. So these are like soldiers, but they're fallible soldiers. They will fail us. You may have as much money as you can imagine in this world, but if you can't urinate, you've only got a few days to live. Anything can happen. These things do happen to people. Or you can have perfect health and all the money. How does that sound? Raise your hand. But no friends. What about that? You see? We heard this morning. Lakshmi Devi is looking around basically at all of us. And she's saying this one has such and such a qualification, but here's the downside. You see? Even among the demigods, she's seeing that all these persons who are not iron, they're all flawed. So we've taken shelter because we're ishad apeta, having turned away from Bhagavan. We've taken shelter of so many fallible soldiers like this. Tesham pramatta nithanam. And we have an insane attachment, maniacal attachment two material things. We have pramatta, means a maniac, crazed. Berserk is a nice word in English. Pramatta. Pashyannapi na pashyati. Although the intelligence sees it, the mind doesn't see it. Stubborn, like Jarasandha. How stubborn was he? 17 times. He's completely routed. His army is finished. He alone is standing on the battlefield, and Krishna humiliates him by sending him away. The very worst thing. Maranadati rachyate. For a kshatriya, dishonor is worse than death. 17 times. But because he had bad association, like Kamsa, they're encouraging, no, just next time it will be better, it's okay, just try again. And if at first you fail, then... So, this is our position, actually. This is actually our position. Pashyannapi na pashyati. We see this, but we don't see this. So, these are the persons who are distracted, too distracted. And by what? By things that they want to be distracted by. Maya serves an instrumental purpose. It's not that Maya is forcing something on us that we don't want. We want this, and therefore Maya fills that need. This is the point. It's supply and demand, you can say. So, the Jnani doesn't have this problem. This is what distinguishes him here. The word vishishyate means distinguished. And this is the second reason Sridhar Swami gives. The third is that Krishna is dear to him. What happens when you remove all the natural predators in a given ecosystem? Anybody biologists here? Sometimes they introduce species from foreign countries. It's like here in India, they've introduced this shrub that the roots go very, very deep in the ground, and it sucks up all the water out of the ground. And you can't pull it up and you can't get rid of it because it's gone wild. It's gone viral, as we say in digital world. It's gone wild. It's all over the country. It's a big headache because it doesn't belong here actually. In other places they introduce animals, artificial species, and because there's no natural predator to keep the population there in check, they grow way out of proportion and destroy the entire ecosystem. So this is kind of what it's like with our anarthas. Our anarthas, there's nothing holding them in check because we're not following the process of bhakti. We're not situated in self-realization, and therefore they just run rampant and they take over everything. Bhagavatam also gives this analogy, just like a well is covered by tall grass and weeds and so many things. So the Jnani doesn't have this problem. Therefore, the only thing that is left is that the soul can shine through without any obstruction whatsoever. And what is the quality of the soul? Jiver Sharup Hai Krishner Nityadash. He is the eternal servant of Krishna. He just relishes this loving relationship with Krishna. And because of the principle we've already mentioned twice, Yayata mam prapadyante tas tathaiva bhajami, Krishna says. I will reciprocate it exactly in proportion. To the degree that this person loves me, I will love him. These four things. He is constantly engaged. He's so engaged because he's liberated, and therefore he loves Krishna, and therefore Krishna loves him. These are four specific reasons that make the Jnani, among all these Pradhani Bhuta Bhaktas, more advanced, more special, best, actually. Most of the acharyas are glossing the term here. Shreshtha, the best means, Vishishyate, here they say, means Shreshtha, the best, Uttama. Okay, so this, these things we can consider. Now, this illustrates the importance of another very pivotal verse or key verse of Bhagavad-Gita, which is in chapter 18. Can anybody guess what verse I'm thinking of? Number 54. Brahma bhuta prasannatma na shochati na kangshati samasarveshu bhuteshu mad bhaktim labhate param. He says, one who is thus transcendentally situated at once realizes the supreme Brahman and becomes fully joyful. He never laments, nor desires to have anything. He is equally disposed toward every living entity. In that state, he attains pure devotional service unto me. This describes the substrate of bhakti. What does substrate mean? The foundation. If you want to build a house, you have to have a solid foundation. Otherwise, that house will definitely collapse. So, that's called a substrate or a foundation. And the foundation of the house of bhakti is this Brahmabhuta liberation. You have to understand, as Prabhupada says in his purport here. First of all, there are 4 sequences that he mentions. The first thing you have to do is realize that you are different from the material body. That is troglodyte, spiritual life. That is sub-neophyte realization is required. You have to realize that you're not this material body. When you're further advanced, then you come to see the all-pervading spirit that pervades this world, and which is the life of life, and the life of your life as well. The consciousness, the same thing that you are, but on a supreme scale. This is Brahman realization. When that realization becomes even more personal, then we recognize the existence of upadrashta and anumanta within our hearts. The person who is observing everything about us and everything that we're doing and is supplying all the information that we require for whatever purposes we desire, he's called upadrashta, and anumanta means he allows. He doesn't interfere. Yate chasi tatakuru, as he tells Arjuna here in Bhagavad-Gita. He allows us to do anything. This is Paramatma. So matta smritir jnanam apohanam cha, Krishna says in chapter 15, as we desire, he will give us the illumination that we seek. He'll give us the knowledge that we require. He'll cover over our intelligence if that's what we want. He will supply every mode of distraction. So, this is Paramatma. And then, when one is fully purified, Srila Prabhupada uses the word purified, as if to say that when you are only realizing Brahman or Paramatma, there's some contamination remaining. That is what it implies, isn't it? Strong terms. When one is fully purified, he realizes that his constitutional position is to be the eternal servant of God. So this has to happen. Without this knowledge, all the bhakti that we purport to practice, or believe that we're practicing, or pretend to practice, or even only seek to practice at some point in the undefined future, it cannot really manifest. It can't really manifest. Therefore we say, this Brahman realization is the substrate of bhakti, and it is what Krishna begins with in today's verse. The jnani. This is what it means. Jnana ultimately means Brahmabhuta Gyan. What does Gyan mean? Jnana. Who knows? You have to know Sanskrit to answer this question.
Awareness that I am.
Yes, awareness. I like this word. Yes. Awareness. We translate it for convenience sake as knowledge. Even Srila Prabhupada translates it as knowledge. Actually, it means awareness. And awareness is the characteristic of which mode of material nature? Mode of goodness. Therefore, the mode of goodness is considered to be more spiritual than the other modes. And the persons who are situated in the mode of goodness within this world, they're also considered to be more spiritual than the other persons. This is why we respect the Brahmanas and the sannyasis. Here it's described. I think it is Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur again. He says the jnani in this verse means sannyasi. Nishkam. He has no material desires. So and Prabhupada says something very significant here in his purport. He says, in the preparatory stage, The man who is in full knowledge of the Supreme Lord is at the same time executing devotional service is very dear to the Lord. Why does he say in the preparatory stage? That's interesting, isn't it? Why does he say this? The Brahmin who is a devotee, that is to say the self-realized person who is a devotee, is in the superior position in the preparatory stage. Why preparatory stage? Who has some ideas about this?
He has not achieved prema yet.
Huh?
He has not yet achieved prema.
Yeah, he's not yet achieved prema. This is the point. Prema pumartho mahan. Actually, if we remember what Srimad Bhagavatam teaches us in the beginning, this bhakti-yoga process is actually happening on the liberated platform. So what are we practicing if we are sakama devotees and conditioned souls, but we are pradhana bhuti bhaktas? Our main goal in life is Krishna consciousness. Then what are we practicing in that point? I call it probate bhakti. Bhakti with training wheels, you can say. It's not real devotion. Real devotion is described in chapter 18, text 54. Brahmabhuta prasannatma na shochati na kankshati. He says, first of all, Brahmabhuta, you have to have identified yourself completely as Brahman. That has to happen. Aham brahmasmi. Prasannatma. The characteristic of that realization is that you become joyful, relieved of all the deha problems and mental problems. And then the characteristic of that state is what? Na shochati, na kankshati. You're neither whining about your fate, neither are you hankering after something that somebody else maybe has, that you would rather have. Na shochati, na kankshati. In other words, you're not envious anymore. Therefore, samas sarveshu bhuteshu. You can see all living entities as the same. Until we come to this state, we're going to see some people as favorable, other people as unfavorable. We're going to feel positively towards some persons, and we're going to feel negatively towards other persons. This is Maya. So, real devotion begins when we come above all this. Brahmabhuta prasannatma. And then Krishna says that, mad bhaktim lebhate param. This is called param bhakti. Why param bhakti? Because it's better than any other kind of bhakti. We're practicing so-called bhakti. Probational bhakti, as I said. Or, what does he call it? Bhaktivinoda Thakur. Bhakti abhas. Bhakti abhas. A shadow, a semblance of bhakti. We're only able to engage as conditioned souls in the service of the Lord if we are pleasing the Lord's representative, his pure devotee. And then we always have to remember that it's not my service, it's not my relationship, it's his relationship. By his grace, by his divine grace, he's allowed me to participate in his service. Because I'm not awake yet. This humility has to be there. This is the point. Then when we wake up, that is what this verse is, 1854. Then that is the substrate, as we said, or the foundation on which we can actually build our own house of bhakti by his divine grace. So, very important things here. But among those who are still striving, Krishna says here in this verse, the jnani is the best for these 4 reasons. Being constantly engaged in Krishna's service, he becomes distinct from the other 3 who are erratic in their devotion. And the reason he's constantly engaged is because he's liberated, as we've described. As a result, his natural Krishna consciousness comes through, and he develops the love of Krishna, and because he's loving Krishna, therefore Krishna is loving him. These are 4 things we can meditate on. He goes on in the next verse. I won't go too far into it, but he says, they're all great souls. Udara sarva evaite jnani tu atmaiva me matam. They're all great souls, but I consider the jnani to be myself, because the jnani can actually identify. If he's a devotee, this is qualified by all of the acharyas, Ramanujacharya beginning, Madhvacharya also, Sridhar Swami, on down the line, they all say the same thing. This qualification of the jnani is not because he has knowledge, but it is because he is engaged in devotional service with that knowledge. It's like Srila Prabhupada says, you may have 10 zeros, but as soon as you put a 1 in front of them, then it's immediately a very high number. This is the jnani. Without Krishna, Gyan and even liberation, even Brahmabhuta, without Krishna Bhakti, or without any goal of Krishna Bhakti, for the Guni Bhuta Jnani, it's just so many zeros. But if you put the 1 in front of it, by surrendering to the bona fide Vaishnava, and actually engaging yourself, engaging your volition in the ideal of becoming a pure devotee, then you have a 1 in front of it. Okay, I'm going to stop here, but if anybody has any questions or comments, maybe we can discuss some of these points. Yes.
Thank you, Prabhuji, for your class. Prabhuji, in the 14th chapter, Lord explains that Nam Chaiva Vicharana Bhakti Yogena Sevate. There, the Lord explains that the sadhaka is free from modes even from the beginning of devotional service.
By divine grace. Not that he's realized. He's not realized necessarily. I mean, he may be. But, I mean, who is it that the verse also says, Sagunan Samati Janyan Brahmo Bhuyaya Kalpate. He comes to the point that we're discussing. So they're very closely related. Whether you define Brahman realization via negativa, by saying that there's no hankering and no limitation and you see everyone the same, or you define it as being free from the modes, it's 6 or 1/2 dozen of the other, isn't it? Is that answering your question?
Also, one more devotee said that this Brahmabhuta platform, like a wire, and then going to bhakti, is not the path of bhakti exactly. And when we progress through Shraddha, was not able to understand that how we progress through this path of Shraddha and Artha-nivritti is different, and the way we go from Brahmabhuta to Shuddha Bhakti is different. I just heard that, so I don't know.
This is why I think the acharyas have given us these 2 categories to work with. Guni bhutas and pradhani bhutas. Guni bhuta means you're not a devotee, but you're doing everything that a devotee is doing. Just like, I hate to say, if anyone is Malayali here, you have my apologies. If you go to Guruvayur, you'll find that every morning they're chanting Hare Krishna Kirtan, and they're worshipping Sri Krishna, and they're studying Srimad Bhagavatam, and they're pakka Mayavadis. So this is Guni Bhuta. They have not made pure devotional service their exclusive ideal, and they're not trying to cultivate it also. But they are engaged in devotional service. You see? And whereas the Pradhani Bhutas, they may be, even in the beginning, they may have fall downs, Krishna says. Apichet suduracharo. Not only bad things, but extremely heinous things they may do. But because they have made Krishna their goal, and because they're working, if they're working, under the guidance of a bona fide sponsor in the form of a pure devotee, like Srila Prabhupada, Kam chalega. Yes.
In 7.1, the Acharyas say that this is the Kevala Bhakti platform, Maya Sakta Manapala.
Yes.
I was just having a doubt that Kevala Bhakti is only for the perfect ones, or those who want to be perfect also?
No, that is the distinction. Kevala Bhakti means the perfect devotee, whereas Pradhani Bhuta Bhakti is the person who may want to be a Kevala Bhakti, but he's not yet. Now, to make matters more confusing, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he explains, if you have a green mango or a red mango, are they both mangoes? Yes. Do they have the same effect on your system if you eat a green mango and if you eat a red mango? No, it has the opposite effect. Devotional service is like this. We're going through neophyte devotional service, and analogously, we can say, we're going through the process of karma first, and then jnana second. But it's not Guni Bhuta karma, and it's not Guni Bhuta gyan. It's Pradhani Bhuta karma and Pradhani Bhuta gyan. So it doesn't really matter whether you're coming from a position of non-devotion or whether you're coming from a position of neophyte devotion. You have to learn these lessons. Brahmabhuta Prasanatma, that it has to happen. If you don't have that, then you don't really get, well, mad bhaktim labhate param. You don't get the supreme bhakti. And this is why Krishna says later on, much later in this chapter, Yesham tuantagatam papam jananam punyakarmanam te dvandva moha nirmukta bhajante mam dridhavrataha. Those persons, he says, who can sustain a mature commitment to pure devotional service, they have acted piously in this life, and they have eradicated the results of their past impiety. That has to happen. It doesn't matter whether you have knowledge or not. It has to happen. Otherwise, bhakti is not going to come. Now, this can happen miraculously also. This is another consideration. By causeless mercy, by inconceivable, amazing grace, as they say in English, of a pure devotee, even a thoroughly unqualified person can suddenly just zoom to perfection within a second. It can happen. But mostly we don't depend on that likelihood because it's unlikely. In the same way Prabhupada says, we don't just hang out around the university and just wait for them to give us an honorary degree. It doesn't happen like that. Okay, is it clear?
One devotee also asked me that Brahmabhuta platform correspond to which level of bhakti? I couldn't answer that.
I've described that. The level is the foundation.
Means Nishtha? You're saying in terms of Nishtha, which he asked.
Well, according to this verse, Nishtha will be the characteristic of Brahmabhuta, won't it? Otherwise, you're going to be unstable. Chanchala bhakti. We want dridha bhakti. Okay. Somebody else, yes.
Yes, bro. I have a question. Is you mentioned this like a half line in your class that when you awaken, that before by the mercy of the Guru, you can do actually you're participating in his service. But when you awaken, you can start working on your own relationship with Krishna. Can you describe more about it? Are you talking here about what Prabhupada mentions, I think, in the Nitta of Devotion, that some ragatmika bhakti will reveal itself or something?
Well, we call it Raganuga Bhakti because Ragatmika Bhakti is the bhakti of Nitya Siddhas in the spiritual world, Nitya Parishads.
Yeah, they come and then they will reveal what is the path of your Raganuga sadhana form to come to the perfection, which is, I mean, it's what I was thinking.
Of all topics to discuss, and of all the places to discuss it, this is a big topic. But here's the simple. Keep it simple. Yasya prasadat bhagavat prasado. Yasya prasadan nagati kotopi. It doesn't matter whether you're in Goloka or in Gokula or in the material world or in the Brahmajyoti. Unless you please the spiritual master, everything is finished. You cannot get off the ground. This is the point. Other what do I want to say? The minutiae of this, of this topic. It's not really that essential to discuss. Does it seem like I'm evading your question?
I'll ask you in private. If you do bhakti, which is it's like mixed in like bhakti under the nose.
Yes.
Because you're not awakened yet.
Yes.
What is the result of that?
I described that, or rather, Vishwanath Chakravarti describes it. If you're practicing karma mishra bhakti, and you want money, then you'll get money. If you're practicing karma mishra bhakti and you want freedom from distress, you'll get that. If you are practicing karma mishra bhakti, what's the other one? You're just curious, then you'll find out, oh, Krishna is very nice. But you won't necessarily get prema in sakhya bhav or vatsalya bhav or even dasya bhav sometimes. You'll just stay on the appreciative platform, shantarasa. This is the problem. So that's that. And then if you're a jnani instead, then you will get jnana mishra bhakti, practicing jnana mishra bhakti. Then you will get either liberation or means impersonal liberation. You'll become Brahmabhuta. But what you do then? At that point, you require the mercy and the input and the direction of a bona fide devotee in order to advance further. Because just removing the obstacle is not the goal. It's not the final siddhi for us. We actually want to go to prema, and that can only happen when we get mercy from a pure devotee. However we get that mercy, from whatever devotee, wherever, whenever, that's relative. But the absolute principle here is that we have to get mercy from a pure devotee. Therefore I said, yasya prasadad. Is that okay?
Yeah. You mentioned that according to Nishtha, or like Anartha-nivritti is the pre-moksha platform. Sometimes it says that bhava is compared to moksha. Now, can you clarify this? That means that asakti would also be above moksha.
Yeah, I've not heard that bhava is the same thing as Brahmabhuta. I've not heard that. I mean, you can say confidently that bhava bhakti will have the characteristic of Brahmabhuti, but I don't know that I would want to equate them. There's some subtle difference. Any other questions or comments? Yes, Raghav.
Can you please elaborate a little bit more about your example of Guru Vayu, that Mayavadis also serve Krishna and read Bhagavatam, and still I'm trying to comprehend that.
I was illustrating the principle that Guni Bhuta Bhakti is not enough. It has to be Pradhani Bhuta Bhakti, which means you have to invest your own volition in the ideal of pure Krishna consciousness as Rupa Goswami defines it. It's not a mechanical process that if you just do these things, worshipping even Krishna, or hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, or associating with devotees, etc., etc., it's not automatic that you will get pure Krishna consciousness as a result, because you will remain on the platform of Guni Bhuta Bhakti, which by many definitions is non-devotion. Just like Shantarasa. Some acharyas consider Shantarasa to be outside of the realm of pure Krishna consciousness, and others are liberal enough to admit it. So it's the same thing with this, Guni Bhuta Bhakti. You know, because it's like, because they're worshipping Krishna, obviously, they can be considered to be devotees. From an external, looking at them from an external perspective, they look to be devotees. There doesn't seem to be any difference. But what's happening in the heart is very different. Very, very different. This is the important thing.
So that could be true for many of us who are not really having that feeling inside our heart in terms of Krishna consciousness.
I don't know about that, because that is the distinction between Guni Bhuta Bhakti and Pradhani Bhuta Bhakti. Pradhani Bhuta Bhakti means you may not be very advanced at all. You may have every anartha under the sun, but you have the intention. This is the point. Let's get this more extreme. Hinayana Buddhism and Mahayana Buddhism. They're both Buddhism, but Mahayana Buddhism resembles bhakti, unlike Hinayana. They have deities of Buddha, they're waving incense, they're praying. Well, who are you praying to if there's no God? But they do these things. But it's not the same thing as worshipping Vishnu, even though Buddha is an incarnation of Vishnu. So it's like that. Therefore I said it's, you know, I won't even say in this case, you know, Pradhani Bhuta Bhakti is probate bhakti, but Guni Bhuta Bhakti is analogous bhakti. It's like, you know, homological bhakti. Looks like bhakti, but it's not. Okay? All right. I think it's time to stop then. Thank you very much. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.